Is that brand
That's
name?
so cool. And then another guy who ordered a mask. I've seen that.
Yeah.
So cool. Thanks for the support, guys.
Should definitely get a mask. I definitely need some masks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I can wear them to work, and then people will be like, "What's that?" And I can tell them. Do I have business cards?
What? Business cards?
I don't know.
Man. We need
stickers.
stickers.
I got some stickers. I bought some stickers.
Good, because then people could be like, "Oh, what's your podcast?" And I'm like, "Oh, Deke Snipe Sally." And then an hour later, like, what they say her name, like, what she say that was? Because I know that's the way I would be. I'd never remember that.
We got to get the bumper stickers that says, "I'm listening to DSC Podcast."
Well, guys,
oh God,
if you're wondering what the hell we're talking about, we got lots of cool stuff happening at Deke Snipe Sally. So before we break into what's coming up this episode, we do have a new merch line. We just rolled out the lovely Kylie.
I'm being Vanna right now.
Yeah. So we're like,
wrong way, this way.
Yeah. We're rolling out some new merch.
But I mean, they're really nice little bottles. They're aluminum, and you have a lid, like a lid that you can put on it, and then you can hook it onto your backpack or whatever. I hit my mic again.
Awesome.
I know. I'm sorry.
I'm gonna keep a tally this episode. I'll let you guys know at the end how many times she hits her mic, because it's
you pop up a number every time you do it. 2, 3, 4, 5. Do it.
That's a good idea.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, but we got a merch line, and like I said, there's some cool stuff coming out of that merch line. Our logo seems to be a bit popular among you young kids, so that's cool. We're not making much money off it, but it's getting it out there, and that's cool. So thanks for the support.
Also have some cool hats.
Yeah.
But they're not on the website. But
also, bigger news, even way bigger news. All you can hope when you do something like this and put it in the world is that people see it and they like it. And the greatest compliment that you can be paid as a content creator is when someone sees your product and they say, you know what, I'd be willing to put my money behind that. Which is what we're proud to announce today. We've got a sponsor which has come on board, a fantastic sponsor at that. We're really proud to announce that PHG Sports out of Ontario has decided to sponsor our podcast. If you're not familiar with
Pond Hockey Guys, isn't it? Is that what it stands for?
That's what it stands
Sorry,
for.
I didn't know if you were going to explain that.
No, that's fair. But phgsports.com. We're under website across the bottom here. We'll get some more cool graphics and video and good stuff for those guys to display for you guys. But basically, they're a sports memorabilia company out of Ontario. Their slogan is "The pros sign with us." So if you're looking for high end merch,
signed memorabilia.
Yeah, that's your place to go. They've had George St. Pierre, they've had Mike Tyson, Hulk Hogan, they've had John Beliveau. Our own William Nylander signed with them, Mario Lemieux, Tony Romo.
He's the guy who be set up at Costco, right?
Yep, same company.
Costco Roadshow.
So if you guys ever see, signed jerseys for sale at Costco, wondering if they're legit, they are, and it's these guys who are doing it.
Yeah, 100%.
PHG.
So if you're looking for a guarantee, don't buy on eBay, guys. You'll get burned.
Way too expensive.
I've been into the memorabilia thing for a long time. That's how I met the guys at PHG. And if you want to put your money where you know you're not going to get burned, talk to the pros. And that's PHG Sports out of Ontario. So again, thanks so much for coming on board. We love you guys. Again, more info coming on the PHG sponsorship throughout each and every podcast. So make sure you check out their website, guys. And like we always say, support the people who support you. So if you like our podcast, make sure to pop on their website. I guarantee you'll find something you love. I can't visit the website too much because it costs me.
He's got cut off.
Oh, the wife is rotted. She's poisoned.
I bet.
The wife is poisoned. Anyway,
I'm not even gonna look.
Big shout out to Todd. We're going to get Todd on for an episode. He's the owner of PHG, and we'll talk sports, we'll talk signings, and we'll talk hockey because he is a Leafs fan as well.
Yeah.
So moving on, we got to talk about tonight's episode. We've got a great guest.
So excited.
Yeah, it's going to be a good one.
Yep.
One of my favorite all-time personalities in hockey is Mr. Don Cherry, like the rest of you guys, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yep.
I mean,
oh yeah.
Don
I never knew hockey without him.
No.
My entire life.
That was our upbringing. I mean, Don Cherry was as much of hockey as hockey was hockey. So, Don Cherry is not our guest tonight.
Too bad. Sorry.
But
the next best thing.
And
no, it's not Ron.
Nope, it's not Ron. Our guest tonight is Mr. Tim Cherry, is Don's son, and Don and
one and
Tim, of
only
course,
son.
father and son, been attached at the hip since Tim came along, and they scout together. They hang out and watch games together. This guy is a
Great
guy.
fun together over 30 years.
Yeah, I've always wanted to chat with Tim, and we've got that opportunity tonight. So we've got some great stuff coming. We're going to hit Tim up on stories about his work in production through the screenwriting and the production of movies about his dad. His time working on Rock'em Sock'em, all that content you guys watched in the 80s. Tim was behind a lot of it. We also want to talk to Tim about issues around his dad. The firing from Rogers was something I think none of us will forget, and everyone has their own opinion on it. But I want to get Tim's opinion on it, and we're going to talk to Tim about that. So, guys, strap in. It's going to be a good one. Welcome to episode 14 of the Deke Snipes LA podcast. Titter tatter. Let's get at her. If you're watching on YouTube, you know the three hosts by now. You got myself, Ryan Gates, Kylie Murren, she's the young lady down in the corner, and Chad Newman. We're joined today by a special guest, someone who I've been looking forward to chatting with for quite some time, actually. He's an accomplished producer, over 32 years now. That's my math, anyway. Different varying productions. He did some work with CTV with the Olympics. He was a screenwriter and producer for the CBC miniseries, the Don Cherry story, which is Keep Your Head Up, Kid, and The Wrath of Grapes. Also, podcast producer for the Grapevine, the Don Cherry podcast. So we're pleased to welcome Mr. Tim Cherry. Welcome to the show, Tim.
Yay!
Well, thanks everybody for having me. Looking forward.
The Rock'em Sock'ems were a big hit in our house every Christmas morning.
Mine too.
Yeah,
love it.
Yeah,
hard to believe we did that for 30 years.
Crazy.
Yeah. I figured too. Like I was doing the math, and I was like, man, you know what? The Cherry family owes me a podcast appearance. I've pumped a lot of money into two things: Rock'em Sock'em and Don Cherry's Restaurant Bar and Grill.
Same.
Yep.
Same.
Yeah.
So no, we're pleased to have you, Tim. We're going to kind of break it up, I guess, into 2 or 3 segments, so to keep everybody on track more than anything. Because let me tell you, the two yahoos here that I got with me, off in left field quick. So my only job here is to rein those two clowns in.
Well, it keeps Ron from talking. So.
Yeah.
It's like doing the podcast with Dad. It's like herding cats, right? Because he just starts down one road, and then it goes down another, and then it goes down another, and another.
That's me.
Yeah. I often joke that Kylie is our Don Cherry. She's just out there and saying her thing and doing her piece.
Ready to go off,
and we love it. But no, let's get the show started with a little bit of your upbringing. Obviously, if you guys haven't figured it out yet, Tim is the son of former coach, player, and then coach, and longtime media personality Don Cherry. So I want to talk to you, Tim, about your upbringing. I mean, you were a young kid when your dad was still coaching, correct?
Yeah. I guess. My dad and I'll go way back. My dad and my mom met in Hershey, Pennsylvania, when my dad was playing for the Hershey Bears in the American Hockey League. And when I eventually came into the picture, Dad was playing for the Rochester Americans. And I'm trying to think, I think he played until the early 70s. So I would have been probably about 5 or 6, and then he retired. And long story short, he retired. He was a construction worker. We lived in Rochester, New York. We had kind of settled down there. And that was the longest Mom and Dad and my sister had ever stayed in one place. I think my mom and dad had moved 52 times during his career. And
wow.
So we were there for about 11 years. And Dad was a construction worker, and then he got laid off, and he made a comeback. And then half a season later, he became a coach, and then he became permanent coach, and then 2 years later he was in Boston. So
Wow.
that was kind of my young years growing up with Dad playing. So I don't remember Dad playing too much, but I do remember him coaching in Rochester and of course the Boston years.
So
Yeah.
how old were you when he was in Boston? Roughly, I don't know.
I would have been 10 years old when we moved to Boston.
Wow.
We moved to
prime
a place
fan
called
time.
Saugus,
Yeah.
and we were actually the first 2 years we rented a place. So we rented a very, very small house, and you know, Dad was making the most money he had ever made, but he was probably, I think his first year in Boston, he was making around $40,000. So, you know, it wasn't like the money they were making, coaches make now. So
Right.
we rented a really small place in Saugus, which is about a half hour outside of Boston. And then Dad signed his 3-year contract with Boston, and then we moved to a nicer place up north. So I was there for 5 years, and then when we were 16, 15 or 16, we went to Colorado when Dad left Boston, and I stayed. My mom and I stayed in Colorado for 3 years, even though Dad only lasted a year in Denver. I stayed there and finished out my high school.
Right.
Okay. Nice for you to have a bit of a ground or a home base for a little while, especially in those impressionable years, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. So, at what point did you make your move to Canada?
In 82, when Dad was probably, so he would have been in his second year working with CBC, and I'd finished my high school in Denver, and we moved up to actually stayed in Wolf Island off of Kingston for the summer, and then Mom and Dad bought a place in Mississauga, and so I moved up, and then I would have been 18 years old when that happened.
Okay. So I'm curious, what comes along with being Don Cherry's kid? Like, I mean, like that's got to be,
I'm itching to know this too. I gotta know.
Well,
I want to know. I want to know just first before you get into, I guess, when he was Don Cherry, but before that, when he was just a coach of the Boston Bruins, how cool was that as a 10-year-old having your father a coach of an NHL team?
Oh, it was great. I mean, going down to the Boston Gardens, I went down a lot of times on the weekends, went to practice, and there was Dad wasn't much older than some of the players, so there were kids my age on the team. Like Jerry Cheevers had 2 boys, and they were Craig Cheevers was my age, Scott Cashman, Wayne Cashman's son was my age. So we would go down together and we would skate before and after practice, and it was a lot of fun. And you know, it was funny. I look back and I said, I wish I brought a little brownie camera. You know, one of those little cameras that you could take, because I look at all the shots and all the players and all the fun we had. And, you know, nowadays you have your phone and you take all that stuff and you document it. But back now it's just kind of memories, right? And so it was a lot of fun. It's very nerve-wracking watching the games. You know, it's not when you go into a losing streak, like it's a family crisis, right? Like it's not like if you're a fan, it's well, you know, someone's, you know, the Bruins are losing, and then you go to work and you don't worry about it. But in our household, it was, you know, it was a crisis because, you know, coaches are hired to be fired, and there's a very, very easy metric with coaches that you'll want a loss record and stuff like that. So it was good. You know, it was easy to make friends once people knew who I was, and
I bet.
Yeah, so it was a lot of fun. I had I look back in those days with Boston and in Colorado with a lot of fun memories.
And it's a big fan base too. Boston's pretty passionate.
Yes, it's not like coaching the Coyotes or the Panthers.
No.
He's right now.
Bruins, right?
Yeah. Well, I think the one thing that was good too is that comparing like today from back then is that you kind of lived in a little bit of a bubble, because I was friends with my friends, and they were more my friends than they were like fans of Don Cherry. So they were my but nowadays, and so you kind of lived in that it was a smaller world that you lived in now. Yeah. And I would think it would be hard to be the son of of an NHL coach or player, and you go on the internet and, looking at Twitter or Facebook or stuff like that. So I think it would be harder for, somebody growing up today whose dad's a coach or a player.
Oh,
just
definitely.
Because,
Oh, for sure.
you gotta stay off the internet, and you hear a lot of negative stuff.
Yeah.
Oh,
go ahead, Kylie. Sorry.
I was just going to say, even just the players alone, right? And their
mouth,
family, and their family and friends and loved ones, they see it. And if they're not reading it themselves, because I know a lot of them say they stay off it, but they're hearing it, whether oops, my bad. But
So constant scrutiny all the time, and it's an ugly way to be.
And a lot of the times it becomes personal, and there's no need of that. When it's at the end of the day, it's a sport.
Yeah.
And that's it. But that's it. Now, Ryan, I interrupted you, so you can go ahead and ask your question.
No, you asked my question. That was.
Did I? I'm sorry.
Listen, we're on the same wavelength here tonight, and I like that. Normally, you're out left field. No, but and that's the thing with social media, and I'm sure you guys get the same thing now in your podcasting days. Is that, I mean, you got to have a really thick skin. I mean, luckily that's not an issue for Don Cherry. But I mean, for us newbies to podcasting, our podcast has been going I shouldn't say surprisingly well. We put a lot of work into it.
Right.
But it's going really well. We're getting a lot of listeners and a lot of positive feedback, and we're very early on. But we're not immune to the guys who are sitting in their basement with the keyboard and just going off because they had a bad day at work. So being able to tune that stuff out, I think, is key with anybody who's willing to put themselves out there in front of the public, right?
Just keep your eye on where you want to go with it. Just keep your eye on the goal, and just
try
those things along the way.
try not
to
let it affect you, as hard as that is, I guess. But
it is what it is. I think. Well, I mean, that's unless you guys had something else about Tim's upbringing. I mean, I want to move on to
I got one.
Yeah, go for it.
How? In 1982, you moved to Kingston. Did you stay there then? Is that like were you called home for a long time after?
No, we were just again, we had a cottage in Wolf Island, so we stayed there till probably the fall, and mom and dad went and bought a place up in Mississauga, just outside Toronto. And then we moved up there. So, but dad's originally from Kingston. So we were there quite a bit. His mom was still alive at the time, my grandmother. So we went there and visited her quite a bit. And so we were in Kingston an awful lot. It was just kind of sad. My dad sold that cottage about a year ago. And she was getting a little bit too much of a drive for him to go down. I mean, the 401 is a pretty bad drive now.
Yeah,
it's pretty crazy.
No, we moved to Mississauga. So I've been in. This is and I live in Mississauga now. So I've been here since 1982. And and a lot of people ask me what kind of father was my dad. My dad was really a good dad. He was. He always. We had a relationship different back then, that he was my dad, and he was always very, even with my sister and I, he was always very supportive in things we did. And even if he knew what we were doing was not the right thing to, was not the greatest, he would tell us, but he would support us. And, he, when we did something wrong or bad, he was like on Coach's Corner. He didn't hold back, but he was always, him and my mom were great. They were the best parents. I couldn't ask for a better mom and dad.
Yeah. I can't imagine coming home to Father's Corner with your report card. You know what I mean? Like,
Dad didn't graduate high school, so he couldn't say too much to me, right?
That was good though. That's good though. Do you remember that?
Score one for Tim, right?
Absolutely. It's too funny.
Well, one aspect again of your it's hard not to make the podcast a lot about your dad, because I mean your dad is such an iconic Canadian. But I really want to talk to you about your scouting days, Tim. I mean, it's something. Scouting is always something which I find fascinating. I really do.
Myself too,
what separates the good from the bad, and how scouts are able to pick out the true meat of it. I'm just curious. Well, first of all, I read, I can't remember where, but I read that you guys used to go out yourself and your father used to go out 3 nights a week. minor
Yeah.
midget?
Yeah, before I haven't gone out. This is the first time I haven't been out because it's all been shut down in Ontario
That's right. Yeah.
for about 17 years. And I would go out probably 2 or 3 nights a week on the low end, and then if there's tournaments and stuff, like you'd be away for the whole weekend, like Christmas time, like right after Christmas, Boxing Day, all the tournaments start.
Yeah, that's right.
And we would go, and I really enjoyed it, and I do enjoy it. I like going out with Dad. I think he really enjoys it, seeing the young players. And it's kind of I learned a lot about Dad, what to look for. It's the scouting's kind of changed over the years, and every year you're you're just kind of learning something new, and looking at a kid that's maybe making the NHL or signing a pro contract that you didn't think was, had that possibility when he was 15, and saying, okay, what did I miss, or how did he improve, and stuff like that. So it's really a lot of fun. And it's fun to see a guy like Mitch Marner, when he was 15, he was really small. Like they're small guys, and then he was Patrick Kane small. And I can remember him scoring a goal. And it's funny how there's certain things I remember. And so he was 15. I don't know how old he is now. So it's a while ago.
22 maybe?
Yeah. So him scoring the tying goal that he was playing for the Don Mills Flyers. He needed to get the tying. They needed to win. It was tied, and he scored the winning goal with about a minute to go to put them into the playoffs.
No.
And then you look and you go, man, he's got a lot of skill, but he's awful small. And you kind of debated whether that would translate into the National Hockey League. And now what is he tied third for scoring in the NHL?
Yeah.
Absolute magician out there.
Yeah. And so, but a lot of the things you see now, I look and I say, yeah, you could see that back then. Like he never puts himself in a position where he's going to get hit. No. He always knows he's always in a position where the puck's going to be. And, so there's a lot, like it just elevated to another level. But it's fun to see, we watched Connor McDavid when he was 13. And I remember leaving, and he was 13 playing against 15-year-olds, and Dad and I were watching the game, and he played for the Toronto Marlies, and they won 3-2. We got 2 goals and assist, and we were walking out, and I go, boy, that kid's really good. Dad goes, yeah, what was his name? Mick something. I said, McDonald or whatever.
There's no way your dad got the name right anyway. I mean,
So
I
don't yesterday.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a dad thing, because my dad would be the exact same way.
It is, yeah.
Mick something, Mick.
McLovin.
Screw it right up.
Was there ever? Do you recall a time? I'm sure this has to have happened with the amount of hockey you and your dad have watched with these minor players. Was there ever a time when your old man says, "Oh, that's the kid there. That's the guy. I like that guy," and you were kind of scratching your head, being like, "Why? Like, what is it about that guy?"
Yeah, Dad really has a sixth sense about not only players, but what's going on in a game. And, it just had to be his 30 years. Like, we'd be sitting and watching a player that Dad would like, and he'd say, I really like that guy. And I'm kind of looking, and he's not on my list. And sure enough, he'll score a goal, or he'll make a big play, and things like that. And and I ask him, I'll say, why do you like him? And Dad just goes, I don't know. I just get a sense, he just, when you've been around hockey for Dad, Dad's 87 now, and he's been playing hockey since he's been junior hockey since he's 15. It's just that sense that I think that guys like him and Brian Kilray and a lot of the older guys that have been around hockey, they just pick something out that, that it's just a vibe they get off. It happens more times than not, and Dad's very quick to point it out when it does happen. So.
Yeah, I recall Don mentioning he was right once or twice.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, I'm also curious about players who, let's look back at a recent draft. Where, if you haven't already noticed, and most of our viewers already know, we're all from Newfoundland. We're all based in either the St. John's area or just outside the city. And local boy just got drafted a couple of years back, Dawson Mercer. I'm sure you've probably seen Dawson in and around. He played in Quebec mostly, of course, but he had a really nice coming out party at the last World Juniors. They didn't get the result they were looking for. But I mean, he can play any position. He was ranked originally in, I think, in the top 10-ish, and he kind of fell down to the 20s. Another guy like Cole Perfetti, who to me is just an absolute, going to be a stud, I think, based now. But I mean, when he was drafted, he kind of slipped a long way. Any other players you can think of that maybe even fell further, that kind of caught your eye and probably bound for bigger things?
You know, like, it was funny, like a guy like Wayne Simmons. I remember watching him when he was 15, and at the beginning of the year, he couldn't skate. He was awful.
Oh,
And by the end of the year, he was a pretty good skater, and he was just one of those guys that he plays the same way. Really tough to play against when he was 15. He was all elbows and knees and going into the corner. And you look at a guy like that he's made it on like his sheer determination, and he might be not as skilled. Unfortunately, I probably see it the other way more, where I see kids that just have so much talent, but just don't have the right attitude. And hockey's very unforgiving. Hockey's not like basketball. Hockey's not like football or baseball. If you don't have the right attitude, they have very little to do with you. And you know, a couple of, one name that comes to mind is a guy named Joshua Hosang. He played on Connor McDavid's Toronto Marley team. And at the time, it was a razor's edge who was better, McDavid or Hosang. I mean, McDavid was a year younger. You had to take that into consideration. But Hosang could skate as good as him, handle the puck. But even back in the thing, he just needed an attitude adjustment. There were a couple other guys that I can think of. So, unfortunately for me, when I watch it, it kind of goes the other way more than you see some kid. Like, I think probably if you ask me who I think improved the most was Malcolm Subban, PK's brother, who played goal, because he played goal for the Toronto Marlies. And back then, in the way the OHL worked, we Central Scouting, and that's why I worked for the OHL Central Scouting and not on a team. We had to put the kids on a list, and then they were eligible to be drafted. And I just said, how can we put Malcolm Subban on the list? He's terrible. He couldn't stop a beach ball. And they said, well, we know Belleville's going to take him because of, PK was playing in the Belleville Bulls. And so they drafted him, I think, the 14th round. And like 4 years later, he was starting in goal for Team Canada. Again, didn't get the result he wanted, but I think looking at a kid that went from not having, and to be fair, it was only his second or third year in goal when we were watching him, but still, for him to go that far, that fast was pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's finding that window of development, like, people that can recognize. You can see something in someone that, he's workable. We can deal with this. Yeah, and make him into something. It's that's another skill in scouting that I wish I could. I'd like to know how you get to recognize that.
Well, I think the main thing though, you got to kind of right now, scouting wise, is skating. If the kids, even at the kids that I'm watching now at 15, so they're we don't call them minor midgets now. You got to call them under 16.
That's right. Yeah.
God forbid. And they changed the name of even the pancake syrup. So
so
see, off topic.
We got it. When I'm doing that podcast with Dad, I got to steer him away from that stuff too. So.
See, it makes me mad.
But even at that age, on the under 16s, you really got to work on your skating. And the kid that's forecast to go number one is named Owen Powers this year. He played for the Mississauga Rats. I remember watching him, and he was probably 6'1" at the time. I think he's 6'5" now. But he still had to work in his skating, and that's why he didn't go first overall in the OHL. And you look at him now, his skating's improved a lot. So there's always that. You look and you go, okay, he's got all the potential, but is he going to improve? And for me, the big thing is, if they improve from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, they're going to get better. A lot of kids improve from the beginning of the year to the middle of the year, and then they don't improve the last half of the year. And then you go, have they kind of hit their peak? And so that's the big thing, is seeing them improve all year. Because if you'll see a kid that kind of comes roaring out of the gates, but by mid-season everybody's kind of caught up to him. You don't see him make that big jump, because it's a big jump to go from under 16 to or under 17 to the OHL or the CHL or the Q.
Definitely.
It's incredible stuff. I'm wondering about traits outside of skill set. So outside of the skating, the stick handling, the everything on the ice. What's a key thing that the scouts are honing in on would be? I mean, you mentioned attitude, but I mean, is
Definitely their attitude.
body language? Are there things?
Well, because I work for OHL Central Scouting, I kind of stay away. I don't talk to the parents, and I don't do the research that the teams do. And the teams will go in and they talk to the parents, and they'll talk to teachers, and they'll talk to the principal. Like, they really got to do their homework, because they are investing a lot of money into these kids if they go in. But for me, watching it, I do watch body language. I watch if a team's getting blown out, who's still trying, who's quit. If a kid's quit halfway through the game, and you can tell the kids just aren't trying like they were if they're getting blown out. So I do kind of keep an eye on that. And a lot of times parents ask me, do kids need to be on winning teams? And I said, well, probably the best scenario is a team that's kind of in the middle, that, the superstar kids are, they're going to get their ice time, but, you want to make sure that your son's getting the ice time. And, and a lot of times you want to see how they handle adversity, right? Some teams, the one team that Connor McDavid was on, I mean, they won every game was a blowout, like almost every game. And they have a rule in the Greater Toronto Hockey League that going into the third period, if a team's up by 5 goals, it's straight time. And I mean, almost every game of theirs was straight time, and they never had any. They never were really challenged, but at the OHL Cup, which is all the best under 16 teams playing together, they lost, and they just ran into a really hot goalie, and a guy named Robbie Fabry, who plays for the Toronto Red Wings, was unbelievable, and beat them. And you look and you go, that's the first time those guys had any real adversity. Whereas they were the Rebels, Mississauga Rebels, they had to fight their way the whole time, and they ended up winning. So you kind of watch for things like that, but I don't get in too much to the off ice stuff. That's more the team's ground.
That's fair. That's fair. We've got I'm not going to drop any names just yet until we get it fully confirmed. We've got a former NHL pro scout lined up to come on the show eventually in a couple more episodes, and I can't wait to compare the differences between, because it's completely different types of scouting when you're scouting for the OHL as opposed to scouting for a pro hockey team, an NHL hockey team. It's two completely different mindsets, but still looking at the same. One's looking at a Rembrandt, one's looking at Picasso, but it's still an artwork. So,
but it all comes down to skating. If they can't skate,
and it just keeps getting faster and faster, and every kid's getting bigger and harder to push off. So it's
absolutely. With regard to that, I'm curious now as well. I mean, you obviously, your dad being who he is, he would have got a lot of opportunities for locker room time as well with young kids and whatnot, offering advice up or that kind of thing. Is there any moment that stands out in your mind where you might have given a kid who went on to be a pro player, a critique that probably sank in?
Not too much. Dad never went into too much into the dressing rooms.
Oh, okay.
He kind of stayed away. Like, he watched the games, and we would kind of leave. We'd always stay to the end. The one rule was we never left early. That was the one rule that a lot of scout leaves with about 5 minutes to go, but we could never do that, no matter what the score was. But I got to tell you,
you can miss a lot in 5 minins.
Yeah, I got to tell you a funny story though that this happened was, we were watching a game, and it was in a tournament, and I'm pretty sure it was the finals. And this one team, we'll call it the home team, they were up 3-0 very early in the game, and they were really jumping around. And then they got the fourth goal, and they were jumping all around. And, Dad's sitting there and he says, they're up 4-0 and they're jumping around and the other team is getting mad. And they got up like 5-1 and they were still jumping around and they were really, my kids celebrating, but they were really going overboard.
Oh, yeah.
So it was going into the third period. My dad says, I think it was 5-1. And Dad says, I think this other team's going to come back and beat them. He says, because they're just furious. And sure enough, it was 5-2, 5-3. And the referee, I could tell the referee was pissed off at this home team because they were acting like jerks. He gave them a couple of penalties, 5-4, 5-5. And sure enough, the other team comes back.
Oh, no way.
They score with a minute to go.
Sick.
So Dad said, see, I told you. He says, these guys are acting like jerks. He says they're a bunch of acting like Dad says they're acting like a bunch of Brazilian soccer players jumping around. So, so we're leaving. Right. So we're leaving. We're walking down the hall, and the coach of the team that lost comes out, and he goes, Don. He says, I'm the team coach. He says, we lost. He says, we're really, the kids are just heartbroken. Can you come in and say something to them?
Oh God.
So I'm like, no, we got to get going, Dad. I got to get going. He goes, no, I'll say something. So he walked in and he ripped into those kids. Thank God they didn't have phones back then. You bunch of I'm paraphrasing. You bunch of hot dogs jumping around, acting like a bunch of goose. You should have beat that team, but they ended up hating you. He says, the ref hated you. The Zamboni guy hated you guys. And he turned to the captain and he says, who's the captain? And he looked, he says, no, smarten up. You're the leader of this team. Stop jumping around when you're up 5-0 and then just blasted them.
That's deadly.
And I think
awesome.
They did go on to win. They did go on to win the championship that year. I think that was in the tournament, but
that's probably because of your dad.
I don't know, but the coach never asked him to go into the dressing room again.
No,
they got the kick in the ass they deserved. They probably made them all better. Good for them.
It might have worked.
Sometimes the tough love is the love people need.
100%.
Do you know
much of that these days?
Well, yeah, fair enough. The only other thing I was curious about, Tim, would have been, from your perspective, you've seen a lot of parents at a lot of games, and you've grown up around the game yourself. Do you have any advice for parents who got young kids in minor hockey or in major minor or whatever you want to call it? These under 16.
Under 16.
Yeah.
I would say that I would say that if your son is at the point where he's playing in AAA and the scouts are watching him, just be quiet and stay in the background. The reality was, Connor McDavid's dad, I never knew who he was, and I never met him, and you never saw him jumping around or anything like that. But
Mitch's apparently.
I was at a game, and I was, again, these little snippets that I remember like they were yesterday. I remember where I was standing. I was at the corner rink of Iceland's in Etobicoke, and I was standing with a bunch of other scouts. Dad wasn't there that day, and I was standing with a bunch of other scouts. No, Dad was there. We were standing with a bunch of scouts, and we were talking, and this one dad was going nuts, and he was banging on the glass and just screaming and yelling at the ref. And we're all looking at him, because I know the perception of hockey parents that they scream and yell and stuff like that. And at this level that I'm watching, it's like a church sometimes. Like, it's completely dead quiet, and very rarely do you find the parents that go bananas. But this one parent was banging and screaming and yelling on the glass. And finally, one guy went over and said, "Sorry," he goes, "who's your son?" And they said, he said, like, number 2. And all the scouts just put a line through number 2.
Oh, no
and
way.
This kid should have been drafted, and he fell. He should have been probably a 3rd round pick, and he fell probably to like the 13th or 14th round. And I remember talking to the scout, and one of the scouts who was a head scout, and he says, if I tell my GM to draft that kid, and that father acts like he's acting, he says, I'll lose my job.
Oh,
he says, I'm not. He goes, his kid's not good enough for him to act like that. And he goes, no kid has. And I've seen it. I bet you, I've seen it every other year where a parent acts like a jerk and screaming and yelling, and sure enough, you find out whose kid it is, and they just draw a line through them. And the sins of the father become the sins of the child pretty quick. And that's like I said with hockey. Hockey doesn't put up with stuff. They don't put up. You better be. And the surprising thing is the players that are like the Connor McDavids or the Wayne Gretzky's or the John Tavares's, their fathers aren't like that. And
No.
they could be, right? Because
Yeah.
their kids are so good, but they're not. And, it's sad to see sometimes that, if a parent acts badly, it will reflect badly on his kid. It's not fair, but that's the way hockey is.
Yeah, it is what
you
it
see a lot of
is.
times that the cost of the sport is so expensive, and it gets put all on the kid when they don't perform. And like I said, you're gonna get that crazy parent, like he's yelling at what he looks at as his investment, because I mean, hockey is it's getting unaffordable.
Yeah,
it's
if people are talking about hockey and hockey's getting a lot of negative rep about it, it's not this and it's not that and it's not this. The problem with hockey is it's too expensive. It's insanely expensive, and it's becoming a social economic issue that the kids who are in the middle or lower end of the social economic scale are not being able to play because it's just too expensive. I mean, I was talking to a dad about 2 years ago, and there was still maybe about a little bit less than a quarter of the season left, and he had already spent $5,000 on sticks. $5,000 on sticks.
Hell.
And the playoffs had still come. He had gone through 3 pairs of skates because his son had a pair of skates at the beginning of the year. He had a growth spurt. He needed another pair of skates, and he wore out them. And he says, he goes, he goes almost $6,000 worth of skates. So he was over $10,000 on sticks and skates, and that's not including tournaments that they go in, and they got to pay for the ice time and all that. And they talk about the lack of kids aren't playing hockey because it's too violent, which it isn't now. There's hardly any hitting in minor hockey now. It's just they got to find a way to reel in the costs, or it's going to end up biting them in the ass in about 5 or 6 years.
Well,
absolutely.
You're missing out on a lot of premium athletes. Go ahead, Chad.
I remember reading an article a few years ago that had Matt Duchene's dad spoke out about the cost of Canadian hockey. And I believe one of the directors of Swedish hockey had spoke out about it and said, if Canada ever figured out the social system to develop their sports, there's no other country in the world that could compete with Canada. It's just you have so many people in such a big country playing so much hockey at a time. The numbers are just there, and they have the talent for it. But I think what it was, and I hate to quote the numbers, so I never plan on speaking about it, but I think to get Matt Duchene the draft day, it cost his dad almost $350,000.
I would say
and
that.
I think the equivalent in Sweden, it was 10,000.
Yeah.
And then they also have a much smaller country making just as many superstars. And they're also specializing in late bloomers and not rich kids.
Yeah.
And it's sad because Canada's going to lose the handle, and try to get it back is giving away all this money. So unless the government invests in, I don't know how else you do it.
Well, it's either that or the NHL's got to help step in. And I think
somehow.
But I think the problem is that the NHL, like, how do you go to the retailers and how do you go to the companies that make the skates and the sticks and say, you got to make less money, you got to have more kids play. And that is a problem though. But I know for a fact that it was 2 years ago, I was talking to a mom and she said, I have 3 kids, but I can only put 1 in hockey. And
I know, right?
And she
That's
says,
hard, man.
And you have a lot of single parents now, and that can't have 2 kids or 3 kids. You can't drop the amount of money that there's just not that disposable income to put 3 kids through hockey. You'd look to the government, can they give them some tax benefits or tax credits or something like that? But and it's just it's when you talk to the Greater Toronto Hockey League, their biggest cost is insurance, and so it's just there's a lot of hidden fee or a lot of hidden costs, and it's tough to see it put on it's basically put on the hockey parents.
Yeah.
And there's another aspect of that I didn't realize. I got into I got a 8-year-old and a 6-year-old in hockey, so I got into helping out coach there. So you get to talk to some of the parents, and one of the parents talked to have an older kid, and he feels unaccepted in his classroom. He's about 10 years old, and all the cool kids in his class are all hockey players. and he wants to play hockey now and try to learn how to play now just so he can feel cool and be accepted.
Yeah.
I mean,
What a
that's crazy.
sin.
It's such a social thing here
Yeah.
in Canada, right? Hockey is it.
Yeah.
It is
So,
though. And that's
Mhm.
the sad reality, is that a lot of parents just simply cannot afford it.
No,
No.
it's insane.
And the kids don't get that. They don't, but my friend plays,
right.
Yeah.
right? They don't
And-
understand. And
No.
it's sad, because how do you explain that to a 10-year-old?
Well, I mean,
Right.
even at the Timbits level, I mean, me and Chad have boys the same age, and I mean, they're only 5. And I mean, even for Timbits hockey, for gear and ice time and a few little jamborees that they do, and I mean, you're into it over $1,000 just for a couple of months of, getting to cheer your kid on, getting to make
Activities.
it activity. But I mean, it's unlike anything else. I mean, everything else that my kid does costs me like $100 a season from to play soccer, from to play t-ball, whatever it is. It's like it's nothing compared to hockey. Is just it's
Hockey rinks are
a rich man's
expensive.
Sports.
Yeah.
It really is unfortunate.
Yeah, we have a 10-year-old here, almost 11, who plays A, and he's every different camp and every different thing of extra ice time, and it's just it's outrageous how expensive it's like, because when
Just
I
to keep
played
up.
20 years ago, I know it was expensive, but I know it was nothing like it is now.
Yeah.
Moving
Yeah.
on. You guys got anything else for the scouting stuff? Because I've ran out of. I got
No,
my fill of scouting.
no,
Yeah.
left that one to you, Ryan.
no.
Yeah, no,
It's
well,
good
like I
info.
said, it's something that I just it always fascinated me, and then to get a chance to talk to
definitely.
Tim was always high on my priority list for that reason alone.
Mhm.
But I want to talk about now. We got to move on to the major part of Tim's professional life, which would be the producing stuff, and this is my second passion, hence the podcast.
Yep.
You obviously got an interest into that early on. So what was the driving force behind getting into production and media?
I think probably, I was exposed to it at a young age. Again, if I went down to the Boston Gardens before, you could see the camera crews and stuff setting up for the game, and, talk to some of those guys. And I kind of got into it a little. I got into it more when I was in Colorado. I got to be an intern at the ABC affiliate there.
Cool.
And was just kind of carrying equipment and stuff like that. And then within a year, I started editing the sports. And long story short, what happened was I was editing when I was on my spare time. I was answering phones and stuff, and then when I had spare time, I would just go back and edit. And back then, that's when they had you had the playback, and you had the recorder, and then you had to put it in. So it's a lot different now than it is now.
Mhm.
And I just did it, and then one day an opening came up, and they said, "Do you want to move your internship into editing?" So I started doing the sports when I was 17, and then I really enjoyed that aspect of it. And then when I moved to Mississauga, I took broadcasting at Mohawk College, and worked at CHCH-TV, which is a local TV station in Hamilton, for I think 3 years, and then I kind of did a couple of things on my own, and a guy came to me, and I wish it was 32 years ago, and I wish I remember his name, and I can't. Woods, I think it was, and he had a contract to do a show called This Week in Hockey, which was to show hockey highlights, but it was on Sports Channel in Connecticut, and so he said, he goes, "Do you want to work on it?" And I said, "Well, I've edited sports." So I went and I ran down the hockey highlights, and we would run a weekly show of that. It was like a weekly Rock'em Sock'em. And then a year after, a production company called Video Special Products, they came to me and said, "We want to do This Week in Hockey, but we want to sell it on a VHS tape." And that's how Rock'em Sock'em was born, and took off from there. And once I got doing that, I was able to open the door for some other things to do.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Glad I could support that cause there, Tim.
Glad. Yeah.
The big thing, I mean, obviously, I knew you were affiliated with Rock'em Sock'em, but I learned that after the fact, because again, I was watching the tapes, the VHS tapes were. I've mentioned this several times on the podcast, but the VHS tapes were a Christmas special for me. It was like guaranteed under the tree. dig for that
Same.
thing, and then when after Christmas dinner was over, on went Rock'em Sock'em. It was just
Nice.
it's become such a family tradition for me. It was like it was as much a part of Christmas as Jingle Bells and friggin' Santa Claus,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I mean, it became part of my Christmas culture. It's such a weird thing. My kids don't get it now that on Christmas I want to watch hockey of some sort, and it's like World Juniors come on right thereafter, and like I'm immersed, you know.
Yeah.
But in saying that, I learned about your involvement with Rock'em Sock'em after the fact, because I was at an older age when you screen wrote and produced the miniseries for CBC about your dad.
Yeah.
So I'm really curious about, because, well, first and foremost, I'd heard your name many times because your dad always would reference his family, your mother, the kids in various spots in hockey, on Coach's Corner, wherever. So I knew who you were as a person. But then when I seen your name affiliated with the miniseries, I was like, oh wow, okay, this is going to be interesting, because it's a family member helping to produce and write more or less a family autobiography, you know.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious where the inspiration for that came from, and more importantly, how long did it take you to get your old man on board with the idea?
It took a long time, actually. I mean, I had kicked it around for, I don't know, probably 10 years before we actually did it. Everyone, every 2 years I'd say, Dad, I said, we should do like a movie of your life. And I wanted to focus more on the minor leagues than I did the, once he got to Boston and stuff, because that was a lot more public. Maybe not as much now, but I said it was the minor league stuff that nobody knew about, that what you had to go through. And I remember I sat and I watched the movie Goodfellas. You know the movie Goodfellas? And that was my mom and dad's life. That was my mom and dad's life, was Goodfellas, was Henry Hill and his wife's life. And my mom was like Henry Hill's wife, that she was this, she was from Hershey, never saw a hockey game, got married to my dad, and got immersed in this crazy world where they had a very, you had the mafia guys where they just hung around each other, and the team hung around each other, and the wives hung around, and the kids hung around. And so I talked to Dad, and he said no. And then one year he says, he goes, no, maybe that'll be good. So I sat down and I started to write it, and then I'd go with him and we'd write it. So I finally got a script, and I pitched it to CBC, and it took a little bit of arm wrestling to get them to agree to it. And then once we once it got going, it it really was. It was very successful. It was one of their highest, if not the highest rated miniseries that they've ever had. And it was stressful, though. I'll tell you, I would never do it again. It was no. I mean, it was just a little bit too close to the bone, and a lot of the little things that really bothered me, 99.9% of the people wouldn't know, and probably didn't make a big difference in the movie. But just to know that it wasn't right bothered me, and it was just too close to the bone. Like I never thought I would be that stressful or that hard to do, but we pulled it off. And Dad was my sister Cindy was a big part of it, because I wasn't around for a lot of the minor league stuff, so she was, and kind of knew, her mom had a different relationship. A mother-daughter had a different relationship than a mother-son, and so she added a lot to my mom's character when we were writing it. So yeah, it was lots of fun. Learned a lot of, it was a huge learning lesson for me on how something that big gets done. And you can't be a control freak. You got to let your baby go at one time. And I'm not good at that. I like
perfection
from start to finish.
Perfectionist, yeah.
I wonder where you get that from.
Yeah.
It's got to be right.
The old apple don't fall far from the tree, they say.
No.
One of my favorite aspects of that movie now, years later, is looking back at it and realizing I was like, geez, that had Jared Kesso as played the role of Don Cherry, and I was like, God, like I didn't clue in until, I don't know, probably a year ago, because I was a Letterkenny fan. The guy is absolutely hilarious. The show is well done. And but it's a completely different role for him, obviously. I mean, it was a dramatic kind of role, but at the same time a little bit of tongue-in-cheek humor in your
I've got to have that.
Yeah.
Oh well, I mean, the
wouldn't be right.
whole Eddie Shore thing for starters.
Yeah.
I knew who Eddie Shore was as that crazy badass coach, but the way you guys were able to portray him in that miniseries, just absolutely outstanding. All that minor league stuff was just so good. It was golden. And in particular, I always remember the cure for the broken toe scene, the hot water and then the cold water.
Yeah.
It was so incredibly well done that I couldn't be happier to see Kessel go on and have an even bigger career after that. You know.
Yeah, he is such a good guy, Jared, and you know, we still kind of keep in touch, and every once in a while, and you know, and we heard that when we heard his dog Gus passed away, we sent over condolences. But Jared really is a great guy. And the funny thing was that when we went to CBC and we got the green light, we had to start casting it. And so they said, look, you know, we're going to cast a huge net. We said the bare minimum though, he's got to be Canadian. We can't have somebody coming up from the US to play dad. So we said to CBC, we got to get a Canadian actor. So they said, okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to like every city, we're going to do a casting call and we'll put them on a DVD and send them to you. And no exaggeration, Jared was maybe the third guy we saw. And we just, you know, and he's the third guy, right? So you can't say that's him because, you know, you got 200 more guys you got to look at, right? And he just looked and Dad goes, oh, I really like him. I think I really like him. And we went through probably 250, 300 auditions, and we always kept coming back to Jared. And
that was the benchmark.
Yeah, it was very early. And so we got in contact with him, and you know, he was really excited. Then we had to tell him, you know, I had to say, do you know how to skate? And he got mad at that. He goes, well, I played junior B. And I don't care. I said, if you play junior B, I got to see if he can skate. And he was a really good skater, and just a great guy on set, really easy to work with. And he doesn't differ too much from Letterkenny. I just said that Jared's not playing a character. He's just playing himself. I said, he's the luckiest guy in the world.
I'm getting paid for it. I watched a really good interview with him with Tom Power on Q and CBC. It's a really good interview with him, and he talks about his big break and getting into it, and he touches on all that.
No, he was
he's really committed to it.
Yeah, he was. And it was, you know, it was a grueling schedule because he was in almost every shot, right? Yeah. And so it was, you know, he had to be, you know, in the makeup room sometimes at like, you know, 4:00 in the morning for a 9:00 call that they had to put prosthetics on. And then he had to go out and go on skates. And, you know, if you're on skates all day, your back starts to hurt. You know, it's not your feet, your lower back starts to kill you. And he's got, you know, he was on skates a lot, and we were on tube skates. You know, we weren't on regular skates a lot of the time. And he was just the greatest guy to work with. And I'm so happy that he's doing well now. And you know, he really is, you know, he's a good actor. And, you know, he trusted our director, Jeff Wolna, who went on, he did a lot of episodes of Viking. He was did a lot of serial stuff, and you know, Jared was he got into the role. He was good. I said the only problem, Dad, with Jared is he's better looking and a better skater than you. Dad goes, well, I don't know about better looking, but he is a better skater.
Well, I mean, over the years, being a Don Cherry fan and growing up like in, you know, Coach's Corner. I mean, I never missed a first intermission in my life. You know,
no.
It's just the way it is. But I've often on comedy shows or on anything else, people have tried to impersonate Don Cherry, and just come up empty. Almost 99% of the time, it's an impossible personality to replicate.
Don't even try.
But I got to say when I watched it, because that was my first when I heard it was coming out, I'm like, okay, I'm watching this 100%. I'm watching this. But I was like, I'm gonna be disappointed. In my mind, that's what I was thinking. I'm gonna be disappointed.
Never
with the actor. But I got to say, man, he nailed it. He absolutely killed it. He did his research, and even as the character aged, you know, from the minors, for one, the makeup work was fantastic. To make the character look the age was amazing to me. I found myself forgetting again that I was watching a movie that was all filmed at the same time. But no, he really killed it, and I'm so
well,
happy.
I think the big thing was like when we were talking and Di was talking to him and I talked to him, and then the director Jeff was talking, Laszlo. You know, we said, you know, we kind of came to the conclusion it had to be an interpretation and not an imitation. He couldn't try to imitate him. It had to be an interpretation of him. Yeah. And I think, you know, Dad probably smiled a little bit more and stuff like that. But Jared, you know, if you got an actor that tried to imitate him, it wouldn't have worked. But you just had to kind of get that little bit of a swagger, and you had to have just an interpretation the way it was, and that's what caught us in the audition, was that, you know, he too many of the guys were trying to be the coaches, and plus you got to realize the coach's corner Don Cherry that everybody knew. It's not the same as you know, the Springfield Indian, you know, 21-year-old Don Cherry, and but he really got you know, Jared picked that up right away.
Excellent.
So what about everybody else? Like, I'm curious now, like when I watched the movie, I'm like looking at all these guys who are dressed in vintage hockey gear and skating around the ice playing vintage style hockey. Like, where do you get those guys? Like,
well, we shot it in Winnipeg.
Yeah.
And we shot it in Winnipeg because of tax credit, so it's cheaper to shoot out there. Yeah. But what happened was we did a casting, and a lot of the guys were the older guys. A lot of them were the Manitoba Moose that played in the American Hockey League. They got beat out of the playoffs, unfortunately for them. So they were kind of hanging around. So we did a casting call. And then some of the younger kids, we went to Brandon and got the Brandon Wheat Kings and some of the other provincial junior teams. And but the funny thing was, and telling a trick of the trade, probably you go back and look, was we got the older guys, and you know, they're in their mid-20s, and you know, some of them are in their 30s, and we said, look, you know, we're gonna cut your hair short because we need a little bit older guys in the American Hockey League. So we went and we got tube skates all through the thing, old skates from the 50s and 60s. And they're basically running shoes with a tube blade on them. That's all they are, right?
Yeah.
So we got all these things, and we got 3 guys to sharpen skates. That's all these guys did for 3 days, was sharpen skates. And we had to go, and the States, we had to get the wooden sticks from the Christian brothers. Remember, they used to play in the NHL, but now they have a stick, and they were the only guys that did wooden sticks. We got them. So we had, so what we were going to do is we just had all the guys put their skates on one night, and they were going to skate around, and we were going to kind of split up into teams. And I was going to say, okay, like that guy's really good. We'll use him handling the puck, you know. And so these guys put on the old skates. They couldn't skate. Like they literally could not skate. And I thought, oh my God.
Don't got the ankles for those things.
But it's just going to blow up. Like, and they're all going, and these guys are one step from the NHL, right? These are, you know, guys in the American Hockey League. And they're all going, I can't believe like Bobby Orr and Rocket Richard skated in these things. Like, they, you know, their ankles were bent, and they were.
Oh yeah.
So what we did was we just said, so what we had to do was we got their skates, and we spray painted them black, and then we got the tuck blades, and then got metallic paint, spray paint them silver, just so you didn't see. But if we were going to shoot a shot of their like lacing up or a thing, then we would get them on the tube skates. But it was funny to see these guys, professionals, just no chance of them skating.
No way.
Wow.
I bet I wouldn't be able to skate in them. No doubt. If there's no ankle support, oh my God, no way.
No.
Well, Jared had to skate in them, and he had to wear them, right? So I said, Jared, just get a whole roll of tape and tape each ankle with a roll of tape, right?
Yeah.
Get some splints. Yeah.
It's too funny. My boyfriend's not the greatest skater, and we went skating like last year, and I was like, sorry, Adam. But I always told him, I was like, your skates can't be tight enough because your ankles aren't supposed to do this. Like, they're not supposed to be able to go back and forth. I was like, tighten your skates.
I had the same issue growing up. I had a pair of $50 Bauer Chargers, and I mean, you couldn't haul those things tight with I mean, you would need 3 big men hauling on that to get them tight. And my ankles were always like this. So.
I had the microns, so I just had no skin left in my feet after.
I'm also curious. What was the other thing I wanted to ask you about? Oh yes, my wife. This is a throw to my wife. I always throw something at my wife to make sure she's listening to the podcast.
Right.
Because I'm 90% sure she's not. She's and if any of you guys tell her what I'm talking about here, I'll be very mad. But I remember we watched when I turned on the Don Cherry story, and it was going through the whole your dad meets your mom segment. My wife kind of she knew who your dad was. Everyone knows who Don Cherry is, but she was never a really big hockey fan. But she kind of was kind of looking over my shoulder and seeing what I was watching, and she kind of drifted into the room, and she got caught up in the love story aspect of it. Yeah. And at one point, she actually shed a tear during the whole thing because she turned to me. She's like that was true love. Like they were actually fully immersed in each other. It was true love, and she watched the whole thing with me. Then she watched the Wrath of Grapes, and then she was even insistent that we watched the Mr. Hockey story, which had nothing to do with you guys. but she was in, and she was like, no, we're watching all of these. So I was like, oh no, perfect, sounds good to me. But I'm curious. I mean, your mom was passed at the time when you guys did this.
Yeah.
How hard was it for your dad to go through the whole recollection of the stories and then actually having to watch the video?
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, it was brutally hard. And Sarah Mannon, who played my mom, when they did the makeup on her and did her hair, I mean, she looked like my mom, and she just got my mom's mannerisms down, and I really don't know how, because there wasn't a lot of video on thing. And my sister and Sarah had a long conversation and stuff like that. But it was we had to film it. There was a really small window in Winnipeg that we could film it in, because it was just when like all the minor league seasons were over and the playoffs were, and the NHL playoffs were going. And then what happened was in the area, they would take out the ice, and we couldn't afford for them to take the ice out, put the ice back in. Mm-hmm. So we had this small window. So when we were shooting a lot of it, Dad was on the road doing the NHL playoffs. And then he came on set with about a week to go of the shooting, and he saw Sarah, and we broke up. I mean, it was way too tough.
I bet.
Too tough to see that. And it was, that was the hardest part, to see Dad kind of go through that again, right? And,
yeah,
for sure.
But like I the one thing that I wanted to, I remember talking to my mom, because they traveled all over the place, and they were in Sudbury and Three Rivers, Quebec, and Kitchener and Spokane and all that. And I said to Mom, that must have been tough. And she said, you know what though? She says, we had a good time. She says, we had a good time. She says, life was so much fun back then, because the players, after the game was over, they all go out together and they would all drink. They all go to a bar, because back when Dad played, you weren't allowed to drink any water. No, that was like maybe 2 hours before the game, you stopped drinking because they thought it bloated you. And so even between periods, you weren't allowed to drink any water or anything.
That's crazy.
And so after the game, they ran to the bar, and the first 3 beers, that's just by osmosis. They just pounded them back. And all the wives and all the girlfriends, they'd all go to the bars together. And the mom says, we had a grand time. And, even with the kids, they would go and they would get a babysitter, and all the kids would go to somebody's house. Then they'd have one babysitter looking after all the kids. And then they would go to the bars, and, luckily none of them got in too much trouble in the bar. They'd go pick the kids up and go back home and everything like that. But my mom said she had a grand time.
Sound like
I think it's a different era. I don't know. I don't think the players do that now. And but when you're in these small towns, and a lot of the wives were, at that time, it was a lot of the wives were Americans and the husbands were Canadian, and the wives would kind of gravitate towards each other because they're Americans and all that. But mom says she had a great time. She loved Kitchener, Ontario. She had a great time there. And when she had to move from Hershey, when Mom and Dad got married, and then he got traded to Springfield, Mom didn't like that too much the first time they got traded. No. She got used to it after that.
Got used to it pretty quick, hey?
Yeah, you had to be a quick study if you're a hockey wife.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You guys have anything else related to the production stuff that you were
I
curious?
was going to ask about the Grapevine episodes. I mean, you guys have had that for so long.
Yeah.
Was there any is there any specific guest or episode that sticks out for you from over the years?
We had a lot of funny things happen. I won't say who it is, but one guest, it was kind of a big deal back then when we did the show, because you got to remember when we did the Grapevine shows, there was no TSN, there was no Sportsnet, there was and there was only one hockey game in the middle of the week, and then there was one game at the on Saturday. They didn't do doubleheaders back then, so you really didn't get to see the athletes that much, right? Like you never really saw a lot of Dougie Gilmore or Wendell Clark or Guy or anybody like that, Guy Lafleur or anybody. So it was kind of a big deal to come on the show, and the players now are really media savvy, and back then they weren't, right? They weren't too media savvy, especially sitting down and doing a television show. So one guy who was a retired player at the time, I won't mention his name because he was walking around with a coffee mug, and I said, "Do you need anything?" No, I'm good. And I would always go over the questions with the guests because I know that, I wanted them to tell stories, and I didn't, they weren't very good on TV, a lot of them. So I wanted to say, what was your first hockey coach, or what was your fondest memory of things? So I wanted them to think about it. So I would talk to the guests before, and no, everything's good. And he's going around and he's drinking coffee and all that, and gets on the TV and gets on the set. We turn the lights on. The lights were very hot back then. They weren't like now. They were like, it was like sitting in the sauna. And unbeknownst to me, the coffee mug was full of vodka. And he, sitting under the hot lights, he went from stone cold sober to unbelievably drunk in about 4 minutes. So we're sitting there, and we're in front of the guest live audience, right? We're sitting there, we're watching, and he's starting to slur his words, and my dad's looking, and I'm thinking, what is this guy, like having a stroke or what? And then you realize he's drunk. And so we cut the shows, we cut the show short and all that, but that was memorable. And but we had a lot of memorable guests. I think one of the ones that I really had a big thrill out of meeting was I met Rocket Richard. That was a big thrill.
Oh yeah, cool.
I met Smoking Joe Frazier, the boxer. I'm a big boxing fan, and watched that, and it was funny just getting into that there was a big UFC fight card on last Saturday, and and I just said, "Dad, you want to come over and watch?" He says, "No, I can't watch that. Dad cannot watch UFC stuff. He's been in a million fights, he's stuff, but he says I can't watch that." And so he saw the highlights of the Chinese girl get knocked out with a head kick, and the guy breaks his leg. And,
I was just gonna say it's a good thing he missed it, because oh my god,
it was a gruesome one.
I said, Dad goes, I don't know how you could watch that.
No, I can't. And it's way too late here in Newfoundland by the time the main event comes on. It's like 2 a.m. I always just catch it the next day. But yeah, we had a lot of fun. We did that for 13 years, and Ralph Mellenby, who gave my dad his break in hockey, he started that up, and and we did that, and then that turned into the bars, like the real bar, because the original ones were just a set, and then we ended up getting real Don Cherry Grapevine bars, and so but those were lots of fun, lots of work, but lots of fun.
Cool.
So I'm curious, Tim, where you stand on the whole, Rock'em Sock'em, the whole concept behind it. It was all hard hitting, fast paced fights and hits. And there was a lot made. There's been a lot made in recent years about headshots and concussions and all that good stuff. So obviously the whole Rock'em Sock'em concept kind of falls on the other side of the
old school
violence in and around the hockey world. Like, where do you sit with that now after all these years of obviously there was player suicide and all these different things that happened from CTE, and I'm just curious your take on that.
Yeah, I think it's better that they don't, that it's calmed down. They don't have the headshots, and I've watched the progression of minor hockey in for the last 17 years, and when I first watched out, every other game there would be a fight, and now. I think the last fight I saw in the GTHL, Max Domi was in it. So that tells you
Okay.
how long ago it was.
Good though.
So I think it's better like without that type of, guy running and trying to hurt guys in the elbows and the headshots. And, but it's just, I think the whole thing was a progression of knowing and not knowing, like when I look at when my dad played in the 50s and 60s and even in the early 70s, again, they never drank any water. Everything that they were, even their diets and stuff were completely different. And so I just think as hockey got kind of more and more, they kind of realized, okay, the headshots are bad and there's going to be issues with it. There was a pretty short period of time where the hockey realized, okay, we got to do something about it. Till the time they did it, it really didn't take that long to do. There were some things that I guess I shouldn't have put in the Rock'em Sock'em, but the NHL, they had to okay everything. I had to send everything.
Yeah, of course.
That's right. Yeah.
It was a different era though.
Yeah.
Hockey was different.
Science wasn't there to support it at the time either.
No,
right?
People didn't know about CTE or they didn't even really know how bad concussions were.
Yeah. And I think that, it was just the, again, you're right. It's just, it was a different world back then. And I don't think, they said, oh, you promoted it. And I said, well, you could say we promoted it or we kind of reflected of what it was like back then.
Exactly.
And
it was happening regardless whether or not you made those videos.
Yeah.
Right.
And like it or not, people wanted to see it.
Yeah.
That's the problem. That's the problem is that there still is, and I'm guilty of it myself. I'm all safety, pro player safety, pro junior player, kids in particular. I'm all about it. But when it comes to a hockey game, I still can't help when the gloves come off.
Love it.
Yes, take his head off. I can't get away from that, and I struggle with that a lot. Because I'm at the same time like, does this really need to happen?
But it gets the team going though.
It has more of an effect than just a
it
fight on
does.
the ice.
Yeah. I mean, and I grew up with Dad in Boston. I mean, he had Terry O'Reilly, who and John Wensink and Stan Jonathan and Wayne Cashman and Bobby Schmatz and all those guys were tough. And it was, and like it was like when I watched like back in the 70s, like there was a real difference. Like they would hit and there would be some more fights, but it really got violent. I would say in the mid 80s was the violence. And I think what happened was that was when the goons started coming in. Like Dad's toughest guy was Terry O'Reilly. He had 90 points.
Yeah.
And Stan Jonathan had 26 goals. And Al Secord, he scored 90 goals in 2 years for Chicago.
Yeah.
And
crazy.
And he still had 17 fights, I think, in those 2 years. So and those guys could all play, but then when you got into the 80s, that's when you started getting the guys that were playing 5 minutes and
just there to fight,
right? And I think that was bad, and I think it took a while for the hockey to go, okay, we got to kind of get away from that, and they have, and I think that Gary Bettman, I know a lot of people don't like him, but I think he's done a great job in walking that fine line of, not. Still keeping the physical aspect. I mean, because you're going to get a lot of bad injuries in hockey because you're running into boards that are anchored in cement. You can't run out of bounds and pucks are
blades on your feet.
Yeah. And I think he's done a great job of still trying to keep the intensity and being physical and not succumbing to, too much of the social pressure of you got to outlaw fighting and all this. And because there are a lot of people in the media, they want to see it basketball on ice.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
No, it is what separates our sport from every other sport, for good or for better or for worse. It is what it is. And I don't necessarily want to see it changed. I do like the direction the NHL has headed. I think it's in the right direction for player safety at the end of the day.
Yeah. It's more showcasing skill and whatnot now. They always make the regular season versus the playoffs like it's two different leagues, but skill still outweighs, I think, everything else this day and age.
Oh yeah, 100%. It's
Well,
really
interesting. It'll be interesting to see this year's playoffs because
I mean, yeah, I'm excited.
It's just, I think, not so much the Canadian teams, but the American teams. I think they loaded up on size. Like Tampa got bigger, Boston got a little bit bigger, Washington got bigger. They all got bigger for the playoffs, and so it'll be interesting to see how they call the playoffs this year. Because I think this year, I don't know, I'm just seeing a lot more phantom calls than
it's really bad reffing.
It's atrocious.
But it'll be interesting. This playoffs will be, I think, a really interesting, especially if Toronto and Montreal get in the first round. I don't know. They were winning 2-1 last I heard. Montreal tonight.
I had it on. I don't know what it is now.
No, I turned it
They
off.
were winning when I jumped on here talking to you guys. I had it on. It was 2-1. The final was 2-1, so they did win.
That's a big win for Montreal.
It is,
yeah.
The one thing I'm hating about and the Canadian division is a prime example. When you look at the win records between, I mean, there's a fair separation in points between Montreal and Calgary right now. It's probably like 8 points. I don't know, but they've got the same amount of wins. You know, this loser point is putting the Habs, which I think are not as good a team as the Flames. I think the Flames are actually the better team. They're putting them ahead by a large margin, almost insurmountable at this point of the season. So.
It's 6. They have 6 extra points from OT OT losses, I should say.
So Flames got to win out 6 games or 3 games to make up the loser points that the Habs have acquired. So again, that's a topic. It's a topic for another day, but it's just an example of, I've been talking about it for years. I hate the loser point. I don't think it belongs there.
I keep telling myself though, for this year, as long as there's hockey, that's all I care.
Yeah, well,
keep it coming because it's dismal and it's lonely.
So Tim, your favorite team must be the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Please be.
I gotta be honest. Because I'm out scouting, I kind of root for players more than teams. I'd like to see the Leafs win just for the long-suffering Toronto fans. But I like watching Ryan O'Reilly the other day got a hat trick, and I remember watching him. So I kind of and to be honest with you, when it's so much on the line, when your family's involved in watching it, it's like, because I look at that game 7 between Dad and Montreal and Boston and Montreal where too many men in the ice. For me, if we won that game, my dad would have signed with the Bruins and I would have stayed with my friends for another 2 or 3 years. If we lost, I was going to move. And that was on the line for me. So to root for a team now, it's like playing $100 ante poker to penny ante poker.
That's right.
So I'm more in watching guys that I've seen in the U16 and seeing them make the National Hockey League. That's what I go out and root for.
That's fair.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I never did get a favorite NFL team. I figured Toronto would have had a team by now, and it's not happening. And I'm also a Jays fan, but I was a big Larry Walker and Gary Carter fan, so I still had a soft spot for them. So I'm a big player fan of everything.
Yeah, the one thing when you live in Boston, you're always a Red Sox fan, you're always a Patriots fan, you're always a Celtics fan, and you're always a Bruins fan.
Yeah, that's it's a hardcore group down there. I know some fans down there, and I know some fans from here that are the same way. They love all the Boston sports.
Yeah, that's it. When you're in Newfoundland, you're either Leafs, Habs, or Bruins.
Yeah, for the majority.
For the majority. There's obviously fans, or there's for every team, but that's the majority.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Do you guys have anything else with regard to the production side of things? Because I'm
all good.
I got one last topic I want to talk about. Well, kind of this subtopics involved. I mean, we tried to. It's hard not to talk about your dad almost continuously when we're chatting, but I did want to talk about basically the incident where he was let go from Hockey Night in Canada. I mean, that's a hot topic. It has been. That hasn't gone away.
It still is.
It still is. I'm just curious now, from a family ripple effect. How did that come about? Well, how did you find out, and how did it all shake out on your guys' end?
Well, I remember it was strangest thing was my wife and I were watching the Coach's Corner. The next day we were going down to New York City. And when Dad said it, I turned to my wife and I said, I think this is it. I think this is Dad's done. And I just, I think there was probably a lot more behind the wheels turning behind it than most people would realize. And, you know, I just think it got to a point, you know, where that the way the social media is today and the way that some of the people are that Hockey Night in Canada kind of got backed into, I wouldn't say they got backed into the corner, because I think if Scott Moore was there, that wouldn't have happened. But I think that that the guys that were running it at the time were a little bit more sensitive to that type of criticism than the other executive producers before then. And so I kind of had, when Dad said it, I kind of had a feeling that that this was the beginning of the end. And the strange thing was that when I found out by a text on my phone, because I had like a news feed, and we were down, my wife and I were down at the reflecting pool at 9/11 in New York, looking for Ace Bailey's name on the thing, because Dad knew Ace Bailey and wanted to put her poppy on the Ace Bailey thing, because that's what all the Canadians were doing that were down there. You couldn't believe on that day all the poppies that were on the 9/11
I bet.
and things. So
how symbolic.
So we got it that Rogers had fired Dad, but I think I knew the day before that was going to happen. But and again, just talking about the media and how things are different now, that my daughter was in Spain and she had a job in Spain, and we got the text that there was the news release that Don Cherry was fired, and it couldn't have been 30 seconds later. She sent a text. She said, "Is it true Papa got fired?"
No way.
So, you know, it's just how quickly stuff travels now. And I think that's part of the, part of the issue right now, right?
There's this cancel culture that exists now.
Sure. Yeah.
And if you're anybody who has any sort of platform, it's like you're on this pedestal and you cannot do anything wrong. And if you do and piss off one small part of the population, even if it's not what you meant, they're out with their pitchforks to cancel you.
Yeah.
When they don't realize that there's people, these are real people with jobs, and this is their job and their life and their integrity, their everything.
And the odd part is they're paid to give an opinion.
Exactly.
You're objectively choosing to listen to them. So that's the part that my mind just can't wrap around. I can't.
Well, even with Dad doing like the fallen soldiers, a lot of people would write into CBC and complain. And, they would, they said he was glorifying the militaristic culture of Canada and all that.
You can't please everyone though. See, there's no matter what you do, there's someone who's going to have a problem with it. Yeah.
So
and that's it.
I remember
go ahead.
They kind of, the one guy came to my dad and kind of said, do you think you might want to stop? And, because we're kind of getting, and Dad says, well, I'll stop, but I'm going to tell them that you told me to stop. So, never mind. Go, just keep doing it.
Keep doing your thing.
Yeah. And it wasn't their first attempt to try to push him out.
No.
Yeah, they were going to
try to win at some point.
Yeah, they were looking for just something to use, right?
Yeah, and I truly believe, and I say this with all humility, there'll never be a guy like my dad.
No,
never.
Because I don't think that the networks will let him get. They won't let somebody get as popular as my dad.
No,
because it almost got too big, and
they created a monster that they couldn't control. Right,
yeah. And they'll never let somebody get that popular again.
No, and that's
which is unfortunate because
hockey will never be the same for me.
No. I remember after the firing, somebody made a video like, I don't know if you guys seen it, but like he had a coach's corner like thing in his hand, and he went out to his backyard. Everything was black and white, like the sad songs were playing, and he buried the coach's corner thing. It was like I was literally like tears in my eyes, right? Like, oh, it's an end of an era, you know?
Yeah.
And it is. And
Yeah.
then that was the thing I was going to say, that I feel like most of the people that were kicking up a fuss about it were people who weren't fans of him, though,
No.
who had absolutely
No.
probably no idea who the man was or knew the name, but that was it. And they just said, okay, this is who we're going to cancel today.
We have a cause. Let's go.
Yeah, let's go. Right. And it's like
Yeah.
they pick out things, and it's
Yeah.
just they pick someone and they say, okay, we don't like it, let's cancel them or get them
But I
fired or
think-
whatever the case may be.
Yes, I think my dad got out at the right time, though.
I agree.
Yeah.
You know,
I feel like
I think if it wasn't then, it would have been by the end of the year.
Yeah, it's changing so much. Like,
Yeah.
into
Well, I mean,
something,
let's
and-
face it. It's not like he never had a good run.
No,
Yeah, I mean,
exactly.
Yeah,
I'm a firm believer that everything happens for a reason. And
Well, now we have
It
the
did.
Grapevine podcast, and I'm a huge fan.
yeah. Well,
And
yes,
so I'm-
exactly.
I like,
totally
you know, it's a bit more no holds barred, you know, there's no rules. Just do what
Yeah,
you
he
want.
can say what he wants. It's his podcast.
yeah.
Mm.
It's
Yeah.
probably what he needed all along.
part of the charm. That's why we listen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Back to the firing issue. And this is the only other question I really had curious about. Right after the fact, it was almost an immediate, and I'm going to say it was both media and fan driven division put between
Yeah.
Don and Ron.
Yeah.
And I don't think there was any way either person could really escape it at that point.
No.
There was some I think survivability that came into play for Ron, who still had to try to maintain his position in the system, but at the same time he was unfortunately pinned against your father.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Am I fair in saying that, Tim?
Yeah, I think so. I think that I think that Rogers. I think they weren't very fair to Ron, quite frankly, and I think they put him in a very awkward and a not very
Yeah.
good position, and a no wins position, quite frankly.
Yeah.
And I don't think that. I think that they were panicking, and they were looking to Ron to kind of straighten it out, and they made in many ways they made Ron the heavy, and
That's what I'm getting at.
which is unfortunate. I mean, I think that, you know, from my perspective, there Ron maybe could have said some things differently.
Yeah. That's what I was gonna
But
say.
you know, I always looked. I said, you know, the two guys that said to Dad that made the decision, you know, they were nowhere to be seen. You know, like
Yeah.
you know, they should have maybe went on camera and said it, and
Yeah.
taken the pressure off of Ron. But
100%.
you know, they decided to be anonymous and let Ron do that, which which was tough.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
100.
guaranteed.
May I ask, are they like still friends, or did that kind of end their relationship, or
They've talked a few times since then.
but not the same?
Well, you know, really, the Dad and Ron had a very strange relationship. During the summer, they never talked to each other. They never
They're
saw
just
each other.
coworkers at the end of the day, I guess.
Close ones, yeah.
Well, I think part of the thing was they said they realized that they had some chemistry and they wanted to keep it fresh. And they felt if they were with each other all the time and they became buddy, then it was going
True.
to look a little rehearsed or whatever.
Forced,
So, and they
forced,
did
yeah.
run in different circles. And then Dad and Ron during the hockey, they would just usually talk Saturday morning. Ron would call them
Before they would, yeah.
before they go on,
Mhm.
and that was about it. So
Oh,
it wasn't
okay.
like they hung around or went on vacation or anything like that together.
No, so it's not like much
and
has
they've talked a few
changed.
times, yeah, but you know, it's Dad and Ron had been together for how many years?
Oh
30
my
years or
God.
something like
That's
that.
30 for sure.
And you know, they fought a lot of wars together behind the scenes, and it's unfortunate that it couldn't have ended better for them. But again, you know,
Yeah.
they've talked since then.
Okay,
It's
cool.
good to hear.
Yeah, I just wish he
Totally.
could have ended it on his own terms, you know, like the coach's corner thing, you know, he was, but that's it. Things
Yeah.
happen.
Dad likes going
Like-
out in his shield sometimes, so maybe this wasn't.
I don't know, man. I don't think there's any better way for Don Cherry to go down. But
you know what? It's kind of
Ball of fire.
ironic, I guess.
Never
because
changed. Never changed.
Yeah, he's always so fired up and
I don't know. That's
stuck true to himself his entire career, and that's it. Like me or love me or hate me.
While I hated it, I absolutely appreciated it. I was like, yeah, you know what? This kind of makes sense. I kind of get it.
And I really appreciated that he didn't come. Oh, sorry, my camera died, but I'm still here. I really appreciated that he didn't go on and make some fake apology, you know, that he, he stuck true to who he was. And he, just stayed himself. And like I said, his genuine self for sure.
Yeah. Well, I knew that Dad, I knew Dad wasn't going to go on and read a pre-scripted apology. I mean, that's not going to be. And when people get into that, you could see they're basically reading, you know, I know that one girl got in trouble on CTV. She said something about it. And
I was going to bring that up, actually.
I know that.
Yeah, she got
that really
apologized.
pissed me off too, but it's like a double standard, but
but when
that's how it felt.
When somebody pointed out and I watched it, I kind of laughed at what she said. It's somebody got broken heart by a hockey player. And,
I know, right?
That's what I said too. I was like,
I watched it with my wife, and she's a fan of the show, and I was like, I can't do this ever again.
No,
I said next time we're in Toronto, I said I'll go to that show with you, and I sit there, and I'm like, that offer's off the table.
No, well, I mean, you know, and like. I didn't want to see her fired or anything like that, but you know, she read that.
I did.
Like that fake apology.
I might have had that hashtag going there too.
Oh man, I was rotted.
I was so mad. Petition to get her back like it did for Don. I can tell you that.
I was having a bad week. I'm sorry, guys. I was having a bad week, and I was like, no, this girl got to go too.
If he's got, so is she.
Yeah,
that's how I felt too.
Yeah, that's anyway. There's cancel culture for you.
Yeah, but you know, she went on and just kind of read like a scripted apology, and that was something I know Dad would never do.
No, and I'm glad he didn't.
No, absolutely. Well, guys, I don't want to take up too much more of Tim's time. Did you guys have anything else you wanted to get in?
I was saying it's good. I see that we have another charity to keep the productions coming. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm working on a couple of projects, not hockey related, but you know, just working on that, and then waiting for minor hockey to get back next year and go back scouting, and have Dad and I go out again, and still do the podcast. It's a lot of fun. That you know, we do the podcasts, and the production value is not great sometimes. We do it in my kitchen, and then we have lunch after, right?
The old mine's right there.
And that's what podcasting's all about.
Right, exactly. So so it's a lot of fun, and you know, we'll just keep it up. Dad's got lots of stories, so it's not like he's going to
that's right. And you're gonna pass the torch down.
All right, guys.
Thanks for coming on.
I have nothing else. I guess I'll do my one last question. So again, we've been into the podcasting only. I mean, we're fresh out of the gate here. This is episode 14.
We've never done this before.
We started in January.
Been in and around this kind of stuff my whole life, but never this out there. We've been getting a lot of great feedback. I'm wondering, do you have any advice for people like us just starting out, getting into the whole?
I just find that you know, you got to keep putting content out, right? That's the main thing is putting content out. You know, we were doing it twice a week for a while, but I just thought that was a little much. So we were going once, but talking to the people, it's content, right?
Yeah.
Putting it out.
Don't let them forget you.
Yeah, and you know, keeping up with, you know, and I think the more content you put out in the week, the more you can talk about stuff that's up to date,
current events,
current events. Because when Dad and I and Cindy, when we talk on Sunday, we got to keep in mind that a lot of people aren't going to listen to this till Wednesday or Thursday, and Montreal might be out of the playoffs by the time we're talking about it or whatever. So we got to kind of keep an eye on that. And I just think the main thing, have fun with it, right? That's you know, and I think that's the one. I think that, you know, even if we didn't have any listeners, I still think we would do it because we just have fun sitting around and talking about all the old stories, and then having lunch after.
That's actually the feedback we've gotten. People like that. It's not, we don't do scripted. We prepare, But we don't do
Right.
scripted podcasts. We get on, we meet with a person, and we kind of pick their brain, and it's very casual for us. So we really enjoy that aspect of it. Anyway, the reason we started a podcast is we were basically doing one for the last 5 years anyway, and not recording it.
Right.
Yeah.
This is not a big adjustment for us. But no, I guess I'll close the show out. Obviously, I've been a fan of your dad's for decades. In being a fan of your dad's, and watching so much of his content that he put it on the weekly, I kind of felt like I knew him anyway. I kind of still feel like I do. It's almost like I've got a connection. And in knowing about your dad and in learning about yourself, you were always tops on one of those people I'd love to get a chance to chat with. Because I just didn't know a lot about you other than the fact that you were Don's son. You had a history in production, and both things I find incredibly interesting. So it's great to get you on and learn a little bit about, growing up Cherry is something that I think is a book that you need to get on.
Yeah, that'd be a good idea.
Yeah.
Hey, listen, well, I mean, he didn't get a chance to produce because this would have been a bestseller had he produced the photo booklet of the Brownie camera from his days.
I know.
Like, there's your missed opportunity number one. So opportunity
Now
number
the
two.
book.
Yep, it's knocking.
Write a book.
But no, we really appreciate you, Tim, making the time to come on, talk to a few nobodies about our passion.
Oh, no, I appreciate it. Thanks. It was lots of fun.
We really appreciate having you. Thanks so much, man. Hopefully we'll see you again.
Thanks.
Okay. Good luck.
Take care.
Okay.
Stay
Thanks.
safe.
Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. We just finished up episode 14. A lot more stories than even I was expecting. I was excited to meet him. Quality guy, absolutely quality.
Oh, great guy.
I feel like I've known him my life. So
yeah,
just like his dad.
Very humble.
Right? Like I grew up watching him on TV, and I feel like I knew him all the pieces, just like
a little bit more fine grit.
Yeah, I think Tim's got a little bit more of the filtered self-control because and I don't think that's no knock on Tim. I just think that there's no one like Don Cherry in the world. So, and that's why we love Don. So
yeah, and this guy had him for a dad.
It'll only be a dream to hopefully get him on someday.
Yeah, imagine. Anyway,
ball is in your court, Don.
Keep reaching.
The ball is in your court.
I'd love to have Don, but anyway, nope. That's Deke Snipe Silly episode 14 in the books. So as we mentioned earlier on, big shout out to our brand new sponsor, PHG Sports. Out of Ontario. We're gonna have lots more coming on those guys soon, but really happy to have you on board. Thank you very much, sir.
Oh, the great more sports mobility. You see it at Costco, the roadshow.
Yep, absolutely. When this COVID is over, get back to buying your merch.
They'll be back. Yep.
No, big shout out for PHG. I'll run their website right there. Should be popping up. And but other than that, guys, check out their website. If you want more content from us, we got some great stuff coming. We're trying to think outside the box, guests that you just don't see anywhere else, and we've been really lucky so far to be able to nab some of the people we've been targeting. Some more great people coming, and I'm really excited. Can't wait to tell you guys. So, but yeah, if you like what you see here tonight, it's a secret. Don't forget to check us out on Facebook. It's facebook.com/DekeSnipeSelly. Follow us on Twitter. Twitter account is on the climb. It's new, but it's on the climb. It's at SellyDeke. And of course, you're probably watching us now on YouTube. So make sure to click that subscribe button there to there. No. To
also available on Spotify, Apple Music, and the other podcast streaming platforms.
Absolutely,
it's somewhere.
It's if you're looking for us, all you gotta do is search Deke Snipe Selly. So all right, guys, like I said, click that subscribe button. We'll see you next time. Cheers.
Cheers.
Deke Snipe Selly.